You are now listening to Creative Hora. Welcome to Creative Hora. I'm Mary.
And I'm Dalia. And we are so excited to welcome you back for season 3.
Yes. I know we've taken a little bit of a hiatus. Hiatus? Am I pronouncing that correctly? See, it was
yes.
yes. Tomato, right? No, but yes, we've taken a little bit of a break since season 2, but glad to be back with you, friend, on this platform. Super excited to start season 3.
Yes, friend. I'm so excited to launch season 3. And we've done a lot of reflecting the last few weeks, thinking about season 1, thinking about wrapping up season 2. And now, as we've been, planning ahead for season 3, I'm so excited to be here present with you and, continue to cultivate this space together.
Yes. But before we get started on kind of what we want to see for season 3, the vision for season 3, just want to run it back and just do a quick friend vibe check. So how have you been, friend?
What a great question and a great way to start the season, friend. Thinking about how I am in the present. And to be honest, I feel a little bit like juggling a lot of different things going on. I feel like I'm in a period of change. And typically when I'm in a period of change, it means that it's a little bit unknown what's happening. I feel like not a full visibility into the changes that are happening. So it's a little bit like scary. But it feels like a really positive change that is going to bring me more in alignment with myself and, my purpose here on this planet. And excited because I feel like there's that alignment with Creator Corner and this really beautiful, like I said, virtual third space that we're creating together, friend.
Yeah. No, I can understand how, or I could imagine and just relate how change might be it could feel all over the place for some in the beginning, as with any change or transitions. It could feel unsettling, but to your point, it sounds like it's intentional and aligned change that you're feeling. So yeah, I can't wait to hear more about it as we go on with the episode, and even as we continue with season 3.
Yeah, friend. But I want to hear about you. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, today I feel pretty, I would say, energized. I just got back from playing scrimmage of basketball, so I think for me, physical activity does keep me very grounded and centered, and the community of having a group of women who want to just have fun and play ball together, I think always keeps me energized and connected with my body. Well, right now, again, like super excited to record this episode as I'm feeling energized right after playing game.
That's awesome, friend. Yeah, I love hearing about your community of, women that play basketball and how tight that community has been in terms of, yeah, being
hmm
intentional about, you know, folks that have same interests, same
hmm
like-hearted like community. So I love that, friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I guess to kick us off, I know we have some exciting things to share with the audience in terms of season 3. But for those of you that actually don't know, we actually just came back from a trip together with some other friends and my partner. So would love to, I guess, that trip for me, and would love to hear your part of it, friend, was so timely and I believe so intentional leading up to us relaunching Creator Corner, but for me personally as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'd love to do a little bit of reflection on our trip and see how that has aligned with us relaunching Creator Corner in season 3, and just love to hear your personal take on how the trip went, and I guess say where we went or kind of share the different things that we saw, we experienced, and yeah, we go from there.
Yeah, I to your point, yeah, we took this like really amazing trip. We just got back about less than a week ago. Actually exactly a week ago. So it's
Hmm.
pretty fresh and recent in, our energy and yeah, so I'm excited to talk about that, friend. I would love for you to get started because you initiated this trip, friend. You really brought it to my awareness. So
Yes,
I
yes.
would love to hear a little bit about, what led up to this trip. And then of course, I'm happy to share my thoughts. But I think it definitely, you can definitely help us set the stage there.
I see what you did there, throwing it back on my court. No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, I think this trip was long in coming. For those of you who don't know, I grew up with Filipino descent. But was actually also born in Japan, so it was been a long time on my bucket list to go to back to the Philippines, but also to Japan. Um, and it felt like this year was the year to do it as I'm hitting a new decade in terms of age wise, bringing in the 30s. So I thought it was a great intentional trip to go back to one, the motherland in the Philippines, but also my birthplace in Japan. So that's what led up to it. And I was glad I can spend it with you, friend, as we hit this new era. And again, in terms of age, I mean, into our 30s, bringing in our 30s. And I just thought it would be great to one, spend it with you and others and a country that we both never been into. So I thought, what a great way to bring in again like the 30s era, and as we
Yes,
relaunch as
yeah.
well, like Creative Corner.
Yeah, and so Mary came to me and she brought this trip, this big trip that she was planning, which from hearing it, it felt like a big, coming home trip, going back
Mhm.
to your birthplace, going back
Mhm.
to your roots in the Philippines. I
Mhm.
felt very grateful that you were open to sharing that experience with me. But when Mary first came, of course, absolutely down. I was immediately down to travel with Mary. As you all may know, or maybe like don't remember, but Mary and I actually lived on separate coasts. So Mary lives in the East Coast, I live
Mhm.
in the West Coast. And we had initially started Creator Corner to have this space where we can still stay connected, have conversations, just two friends while we're living on separate coasts. So this opportunity to go to Japan with Mary was, of course, no doubt. I knew I wanted to be a part of it.
Mhm.
But for me, like taking a trip as far away as Japan was something that is very new.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I grew up in a Mexican household. My parents are immigrants. So the extent of my travel was really limited to, a couple places in the US and then like
Mhm.
Mexico. And that was it. So international travel was quite, quite scary for me, quite new. Um,
Mhm.
but nonetheless, that did not stop me. I was like, all right, we're going to figure it out together. We'll see what happens. But
Yes.
it really felt like a trip that was like a really good opportunity to get out of my comfort zone to do something really,
Mhm.
really different. I don't know about you all,
Mhm.
but sometimes when you grow up in an income where it's like low income immigrant parents, at times there's a lot of like sometimes fear that can be projected onto us from our parents. And I'll speak from my
Mhm.
experience. So
Mhm.
when I brought this trip to family, I know my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, like so scary!" Like just a lot of
Mhm.
fear was brought into the trip, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like God, right? What if something happens? I don't know. Like, is it like I knew Japan was fairly safe, but of course I'm like, is it safe to travel? I don't know. I just started
Right.
overthinking. But I'm really grateful that I took that chance to travel with friends and really experience that because one, it was definitely not scary at all. It was fine. The worst part of it was the plane ride, to be honest.
Right.
Um, yeah, so it really meant a lot to me, Mary, that you brought this trip
Mhm.
forward, and I'm so thankful that I got to do something so out of my comfort zone. I thought
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
going to practice traveling by visiting a couple places more in Mexico, and then maybe I'll take that big faraway trip to a place like Japan.
Mhm.
So You really helped me in terms of pushing me out of my comfort zone and making me take that
Mhm.
big leap as that big first trip. So thank you, friend.
Yeah, no, I'm super glad that you were down because I know it's a big commitment for, being away for a week from your family and from your day-to-day routine. So super excited when you committed and you sent me that screenshot like, "Hey, I got my plane ride ticket." I'm like, "Okay, no turning back now." Um, but no, but I do understand and can imagine just the anticipation of going so far away and being so far away from that safety net, that comfort zone of one safety, but also again just being like, knowing you and just how much you value your family and being around them. Like, I do appreciate you just being so down and to go.
Yeah, but friend, I know you talked about this a little bit, but this is like a
Mhm,
big
mhm.
trip that you were thinking about as you just turned 30, and it was like a next decade in your life to kick things off type of thing. But I would
Yeah.
love to hear about what it was like to visit the Philippines, because for
Mhm.
context, Mary went to the Philippines first and then we met up in
Yes.
Japan. So
Yes.
yeah, I want to hear about that, Mary, and just like
Mhm.
hear a little bit more about what it was like to go back to your roots and
Yeah.
spend the week there reconnecting with family.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I think similar to you, there was some anticipation of anxiousness of seeing family again for the first time in almost like 2 decades. I haven't been back to the Philippines for about 17 years or so. So I think that was more so my thought going into it, like, okay, how are my relationships with these more so extended family going to be? And I also traveled with my partner, Amani, so her safety and comfort was also very important to me. And one, meeting the extended family with your partner with the same of the same sex, so that was also another thing I was juggling. But I think a lot of work I've done in my inner self and kind of getting to that place where, okay, I have a good grounding system for myself in terms of being um just being in my utmost authentic self as I am, and then knowing how to respond to certain things that maybe I'm not used to since I haven't seen these family members were super important for me to keep in mind as I went to the Philippines.
Mhm.
I think also another thing that I learned and just going back was just like how much of change has happened, but also simultaneously, like not a lot of change has happened.
Mhm.
Being in the Philippines helped me put things like in a lot in terms of perspective and just the migration of even having the privilege for some of my family members to come to the US and migrate, and a lot of sacrifices and unknown and how much it took to get
Mhm.
to the US. But then I still have a lot of family members who can't do that, who are still in the Philippines. So I do think it was amazing to one, reground myself in terms of like my cultural roots and tradition, but immersing myself with just cultural foods and things that I could see in the US, but it hits different when you're in the motherland. It hits different when you're seeing it right there, right in front of you. But also the trip to the Philippines was very intentional, because I told myself, I think this year was, I do want to get more immersed into my cultural roots and traditions. So we hit up like a museum that had a lot more history on the Philippines, because every museum, well, the last Asian American museums I've hit up here in DC, they didn't have a lot of Filipino culture heritage influence. So that was interesting to me. But it was super nice to go to the Philippines, hit up a museum to learn more about just the deep rooted things that I didn't know or didn't learn migrating to the US.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think amazing trip. I think it was a lot of intentionality put behind it. Every time I had a just moment of reflection, or if I was moving and just had a lot of thoughts in mind, I would journal that so I can look
Mhm.
back and just think about or look back and reread the things I was thinking of as things are moving around. Um, but I think in some, two things that I did take away from the Philippines was one, I knew how much I wanted to preserve cultural roots and traditions, especially as I'm getting older and potentially starting family planning down the road in a few years. I knew like traditional values and cultural things was very important to me, but this
Mhm.
trip really made it like a stamp of emphasis. Like, no, it is a non-negotiable for me to continue to preserve those things that align with me. Um, but then two, I think the other thing that had me reflecting on was like the privilege to travel with intersecting identities as a first generation um, US migrants, a first generation, a lot of first generation things like
Mhm.
college graduate, XYZ
Yeah.
this, like queer, first openly queer person out of my family. So I do think there's a lot of that, of reflecting on the privileges of things in my intersecting identities, and I think also traveling alone with my own kind of dime is like so uncalled for with just the upbringing that I grew up with, but it was nice to do that and to do that with so much meaning and intentionality and with the family that like I grew up with. So yeah, I think I'll stop there and
Yeah.
it was
Thank you
yeah.
so much for sharing that, friend. I really appreciate you just, being really open about what this trip meant for you, some of the lessons that you learned, and,
Mhm.
just the beauty in which you acknowledge the intersectionality of your identities and, some of the privileges too, or that can happen with being able to travel, but also some of the difficulties that you have to acknowledge when it comes to traveling.
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
well. So thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things that really
Mhm.
stood out in hearing you talk about this trip was this reconnection to the motherland and
Yes.
reconnecting to your cultural heritage and traditions. And it really made me think a little bit about, what this trip meant for me as well in a
Yeah.
different in a different way. Um,
Yeah.
because yeah, I think the idea of the motherland is so interesting to me. I mentioned that my parents are immigrants. Like my parents haven't visited. Well, my mother hasn't visited her motherland in like decades at this point. So very interesting for me to understand like the privilege of being able to reconnect back with the motherland.
Mhm.
With for her it's
Mhm.
Mexico, right? And for me,
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, I can travel to Mexico. I can do that. But like my mom can't. So it is very interesting
Mm.
to acknowledge those aspects of traveling when it comes to
For sure.
being first generation to your first generation American, first generation coming from immigrant parents. So I really appreciate you sharing that. It makes me reflect a lot on that. And I
Mhm.
think also like I've been, I think the motherland is such an interesting concept for me as well, because I think
Mhm.
about like internationally and
Mhm.
as well how a lot of the times a tactic that can be used as violence is like removal of indigenous people from their motherland. Like that's a
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
intentional thing. So to be able to make the choice to, you know, the choice and the privilege and also the acknowledgement of your identity and go back to the motherland is so I in hearing just the connection you felt is so powerful. So
Mhm.
I think that's just amazing. And for me, it's been a little bit hard as I guess to
Yeah.
connect to to a motherland. To be honest,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
born in the U.S. and of course that's like a very like we all in we can talk about the identity of being from here, but then not feeling like we're from here in terms of
Mhm.
Mexican American
Mhm.
identity. Um, but it is something that I think about a lot because with and I'll share this on this space because I feel very like I'm something that I want to be transparent that I am working on. But my grandma passed away about a couple months ago, like 3 months ago.
Mhm.
So this trip really felt like, like I need to do something different. I need to do something that gets me out of my day to day. Oh
Mhm.
gosh.
Mhm.
I'm feeling a little emotional for people that can't see on here.
Yeah.
But
Take your time, friend.
yeah, it felt like really a great opportunity to, without going to the motherland, feeling connected to
Mhm.
this like incredible
Mhm.
mother figure in my life. So yeah, it
Mhm.
was a very
Mhm.
special trip for me, friend. Which is like when I'm talking to you, I really want to
Mhm.
acknowledge these emotions that are coming up because I've had a hard time feeling like this process of grief in my day to day, and I'm so thankful
Mhm.
that I'm
Mhm.
able to do so and process a little better. And I know it's going to take time, of course, but yeah, I wanted to
Yeah.
share this because this is like the most authentic thing I can share about this trip for me. That it was a really
Mhm.
beautiful opportunity to question a little bit what that motherland, what
Mm.
that feeling of home was like for me. Um, for the longest time, it was like home is my grandma, home is my grandma.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when that process of like home is gone, it felt a little bit, it felt a lot empty inside. Um,
Yeah.
So going on this trip, doing something that was so out of my comfort zone, I keep saying that and I'll keep reiterating that because it really pushed me out of my day to day.
Mhm.
It was like an opportunity to start thinking about like home doesn't have to be a person. Home
Mhm.
can, is something that I can start building within myself. And so I've
Mm.
always thought that was what I was working through. I was like, this is the self work,
Mm.
find home within. But it wasn't until this life event happened that I started to realize it was like, oh, this is like such a longer journey. It's a longer journey of life.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that this is like coming back from that trip. I came back and we did quite a lot. We can talk a little bit about our favorite parts of the trip, but
Yeah.
the feeling that I could reflect most on was this
Mhm.
feeling of beginning to really unpack this the loss that I've had in the last couple
Mhm.
months and unpack it and feel it because I could really stay grounded in the
Mhm.
privilege that I've had. To you mentioned this, like being able to travel to a different country, knowing that like some people in my family can't travel. So like
Mhm.
really acknowledging the privilege, acknowledging the beautiful experience, and then realizing that I can bring some of that into my day to day. I can ground some of those
Mhm.
feelings into my day to day to start
Right.
building that home within me. And like I said, a lifelong process is what I'm realizing it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this trip meant for me. And it meant a lot that I got to share that with you, friend, and that I got to
I know.
experience all these new things together. Another trip I know I mentioned, I'm like, oh no, like this trip didn't give me a travel bug. If anything, it made me miss home. But now I'm coming back and I'm like, wait, like I don't think that's true. Like I think it did actually give me a
Mm.
little itch
Oh
to like
wow, yeah.
explore more. But
Yeah.
yeah, I, I want to say my deepest gratitude for you, friend, for like being open to holding this space, but then
Yeah.
also for taking this this chance and inviting like friends to your big trip. And yeah, because you never know, sometimes it's a little hard to travel with friends.
Yes, yes. And no, I do want to acknowledge and appreciate the vulnerability and let it out. Like, it's our podcast plus our audience, but no, I do want to acknowledge that I'm super happy that I did. I think it just going back to our check-in, like it's contributing to the trip help maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but catalyze certain transitions or changes or even
Yes.
questioning
Yeah.
in you that perhaps was needed or perhaps was the next phase of your processing the grief, your reflection. So I'm glad that the trip did that for you. And while you're giving me credit for inviting you, but I mean, you're the one that took that leap and booked that plane ticket. So super happy that you're able to, was brave enough and courageous enough to get out of your comfort zone and give yourself that space. So wanted to acknowledge that as well, friend.
Thank you, friend. I appreciate it. Like I said, I appreciate you like even holding this space. I know that we're both very intentional about the space that we're creating. But yeah, it's a little nerve wracking to be vulnerable to
Mm-hmm.
not just in this space, but also like, we don't know who's going to be watching this. So it's nerve wracking. But
Mm-hmm.
I just hope that my intention in being like, sharing my real feelings about this is because this is really what came out for me in the trip. Like it was a lot of
Mhm.
emotions. It was a lot of feelings.
Yes, yes.
And
No,
even
definitely.
even when I chatted with you, and we had a little moment in the airport where we were able to catch up, and you were checking in as Mary always does, because that's what I love about Mary. She will always check in, and not just on the podcast, like just in general, always checking in. Um, so she was checking in, and yeah, that's what came up in our realest, most authentic conversation we had, which we always try to be as honest as we can with each other, and be our most authentic when we're in each other's presence. But yeah, that's what came up in our conversation. um, that's what had come up for me in the last like week that I've been processing. So
Mhm,
it felt
mhm.
like the most honest thing I can share at this moment about my experience. And I mean, I loved our trip to Japan, friend. It was incredible.
Yes.
I guess to shift a little bit, do you think that this trip, like, what are you bringing from the trip that you're going to ground
Yeah.
to your day to day?
Yeah, I think for me, like, yeah, Japan is amazing. I see the hype. I see all the Japan, Tokyo, Kyoto hype, all that. Um, but I think one thing, or a couple of things that come to mind in terms of what I'm bringing back from the trip to keep me grounded. And I think you alluded to it a little bit, but getting out of your day-to-day routine, I think that's what the beauty of travel does for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one that I'm a creature of habit, love my routine, love, I need to know what I'm doing. Not every hour of my day, but high level, I need a routine. That's what keep me going. But I do think traveling abroad, and especially a place like Japan, such a huge, powerful country, with a lot of technological advances, just way of doing things is very different, is it probes me and pushes me to look at things very differently. And I think that piece of, hey, if there's something that I can do a little bit differently in my routine. So one, the routine doesn't get stale, but also two, I don't need to go to, I don't need to travel abroad to mix things up. There's certain things that I could do, whether that's, okay, I want to switch this one particular meditation habit to this now. Because for example, I was finding myself like I wasn't in my typical meditation routine in the morning because we were on the go, but
Yeah.
I could find myself meditating in the metro or the subway station. I was like, okay, I can do this meditation, not necessarily in quietness, but I could also do it amidst all the not chaos, but moving parts of noise, of people coming in
Mhm.
and out, of the train moving. And I was like, okay, that's a cool way to mix up my meditation routine. Like I don't need to do it every in the morning. I can do it throughout the day and still feel very grounded and okay with it. And I think for me, like that looking at things differently and again, like and seeing how other people what the norms are for other people because we're tourists, but other people around us, this is their normal day to day. Like
Mhm.
they're going to work, they're going to school, they're going whatever to what gigs or whatever have you. Like to them is their normalized days, and I do think it helped me see things like, oh wow, that's a norm for this particular community for this population. Well, for us, everything was so like, oh shit, that's cool. Bidet here, bidet in the public place, bidet McDonald's. But people have been living with bidets in public places for all their life. Um, so I think that's one thing, and I think it goes back to that also helping me get back to season 3 of Creative Corner was being in a different place, being in a different country, being in a different routine. Um, also helped spark creativity in different
Mhm.
lens for me. I got to see how things are done differently, how people move differently, and things I've never seen before. I was able to see that. So I do think in terms of sparking that different type of creativity was also nice in terms of that travel component for me. So, how
Oh, I love that,
about
friend.
Mhm.
Yeah, for
No,
for
go
me,
ahead.
yeah, for
Mhm.
me, it was I guess two things to keep it like concise. One thing was that it really made me realize that in like time is not real. Like time is not
Oh,
freaking
yeah.
real. Like in 1 week, we were
Mhm.
able to accomplish so much. And of course, as Mary said, we're like foreigners. We're not actually from Japan, so we
Mhm.
do have like the privilege of be moving around from like one place to another
Mhm.
with the sole focus of like, hey, we're trying to be tourists. We're trying to see everything. Um, but in like 1 week, we did so much. We
Yeah.
accomplished so much that I feel like it was a 1 week trip that felt like a 2 week trip. And
Mm.
not just that,
Mhm.
I kept sharing this with Mary and our other friend on the trip as well. Like, this is a portal. This feels like a portal. And when I say that
Mm.
on a
Yes.
spiritual aspect for
Yeah,
me,
say more.
is yeah, like these moments that, at times can feel like portals for me, they're opportunities to make big change in a really short amount of time. I know, like,
Mm.
in my
Mhm.
day to
Mhm.
day, at times I can feel very stagnant. There could be like a couple weeks where the week, like, I'm going through my day to day, I'm going through the motion, and the weeks are passing and I'm like, oh shit, I'm already in like mid-June or something.
Mm.
And it's like, where did that time go? And
Mhm.
when we go on a trip and we get out of like, or like as my said, completely out of our day to day, I realized that like in this 1 week,
Mhm.
like there's so much change that happened, like so much change, not just on a creative level where I feel like this unlocked imagination in my like in my unconscious, like because I'm coming back, I'm feeling more like imaginative, I'm feeling
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
like anything is possible type of feeling, right? So that's one piece. But I think also energetically, I felt like my energy shifted a
Mhm.
bit coming
Mhm.
back from the trip. I not only like that little trigger of emotions that started to just like I can feel they're gonna start like flowing. I'm just like they're
Yeah.
coming and they're ready, and this little shift in energy is helping me channel them, which I'm thankful
Mhm.
for. But it was like just mindset. I came back and I felt
Hmm.
so confident that I could do more with my time. That time was not limited, and that in my day
Mm.
to day, I could achieve way more than I thought was possible. Because I think like when I'm stuck in my day to day, I'm like, all right, I got X, Y, and Z done, and I'm good. Like
That's
I'm
it.
like my energy is already low. But when you're on a trip, like especially like a country like Japan, where you just like go 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 for like 12 hours straight, and you like hitting like 20,000 steps each day, you kind of realize there's like you can do so much more in the day. And I don't
Yeah.
just mean like repurposing that for your work life. I also mean like repurposing that for other things that bring you joy.
Mhm.
So for
Mhm.
me, I love reading. I've always loved reading,
Mhm.
and I started to feel like with my I have a long commute when I go to work. Sometimes I can't read. It's just not possible. But coming back and just realize how much time is possible, like how intentional we could be with time in a place like Japan where we're walking 12 hours. I could bring that
Mhm.
back to my day to day here. And I am finding that there is time, it is possible. It's just that sometimes like our energy can be placed on the wrong things where I'm like, I found that most of my energy, I was just putting it back into work versus shifting
Mm.
that and being able to put some of the energy into things that I care about, like my creative projects, creator corner, like my
Mhm.
hobbies, reading, writing. I love these things. And that's kind of what I want to bring back, that I don't want to have these limiting views, even of time, of like, hey, there's not
Yes.
enough time in the day.
Yes.
There's not, I can't achieve that change in a week, because I came back from Japan and I feel like a new person. And I obviously it was a travel aspect, but I think it was the aspect of some of the other things that I mentioned with dealing with loss, and now like trying to
Mhm.
fully express that and embrace that, moving forward, because it was something that it is a shift. It is a big change for me
Yeah.
energetically, spiritually. But yeah, Japan was like, it just opened up the gates of imagination within me as well. Like, because I'm like, yeah, time is not limited. We got plenty of time. Like, you could, like, time can move
Mhm.
slow and it can move fast. It's really up to how present we are in our day to day. And I'm really thankful for that, because it really has made it seem to me, made it like, it has brought back that wonder of, hey, like, like, everything is possible. Imagine your biggest dreams, reach higher than that. And it sounds so cheesy,
Mm-hmm.
but it like I really feel that coming back from this trip. I really feel like that anything is possible. And that yeah, which is why I'm so excited about Career Corner because we're like pouring this back into the space, this like
Yes.
limitless possibilities here.
Yeah. No, I definitely can relate to that. I can agree to that. It's just yeah, and I loved how you kept during the trip. You kept saying like, "Oh, it's a portal," and it didn't make sense in the beginning, but I see what you mean now. By we can achieve so much in a week. Just imagine what that can translate into when as we're back in our day to day things, like what that can translate into um our normal day to day life. So I do think you're right. Time is such a concept, and there is so much more. It sounds like for you, um, reallocation of time to different things that fulfill you. And you're right. I mean, a lot of, I think there's a lot of beliefs that there's not enough time for X or for that creative project or for that creative pursuit or for that hobby that really allows you to connect with your inner self. But I think for me too, I think for like I think there is time for that, for yourself to connect with those things that really fulfill you, that really bring out the best in you. It's a matter about how you challenge that, how you change your perspective and the concept of time, because there is time to pour into things that really energizes you.
Absolutely, friend. There is definitely time, and I do think a lot of it is like a mindset thing because I think our mindset in
Hmm.
Japan was like, yeah, we got to see as much as possible. We only have a week. We got to
Right.
like squeeze every minute out of this trip, and so yeah, we had like a different mindset. And then coming back, I'm not gonna lie, it was like a little overwhelming coming back because
Yeah.
start feeling the energy in this country. You're like, oh my
Right.
gosh,
Right. Right.
it's very different. That's one thing that's always interesting when traveling.
Hmm.
So I have this thing sometimes where I like to imagine that I'm saying hi to the land that I'm in and like acknowledging it and saying hello. And because I do that, the moment I landed in California, the vibes were just so different. And I mean it actually in a
Mm.
positive way. Like
Right. Right.
I felt like the chillness of Cali, the waviness of Cali. And I'm like, all right, this is, I guess for
Not too
me,
bad.
my motherland, my motherland.
Right.
And
Right.
I was like, they're saying hello back and I can feel it. And then of course in Japan, the 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 energy was different when I was saying
Hmm.
hello to Japan. It was almost like describing a little bit as like, yeah, like you there's no not to say there's no excuses, but you can keep going. You can keep going and you're
Right.
good.
Right.
And yeah, so it was a little different. So I I'm excited to continue to one connect with my home within my center, but then
Yes.
also, find ways that I could bring traveling more and bringing some of those things back into my home and what resonates, what doesn't. And I guess as we're looking towards season 3, friend,
Yes.
and we just
Yes.
came back from this big trip and we're
Hmm.
feeling all sorts of things. What are you most
Hmm.
excited about this season when it comes to Creator Corner?
Yeah, I think lots of exciting things coming up for Creator Corner, for the podcast, for you and I. But for me, I think one thing that keeps coming to mind is in reflecting back to the past two seasons is I did see our platform and it's continuing to evolve, but our role and purpose and the value that we bring to the platform is I see us as catalysts for storytelling of these stories of these creatives, but also of ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we focused the first two seasons on a lot of again everyday creatives and understanding their creative pursuits and understanding who they are, and as well as us sharing our own personal values and brand and who we are as hosts, as creatives as well, and having
Hmm.
this podcast. But I do want for season 3, more of that highlighting the storytelling that we do in the platform, um, with these creatives, and even touching more upon like their actual creative projects, their, whether it's a product, whether it's a thing that they make, whether it's a poem that they create, really diving into that storytelling piece more of the artistry of their creative project, or or whatever they're creating. Again, it could be a product that they're selling, it could be a poem that they write, but I do want to hone in our, I guess, our role as vehicles to providing them with a platform to say that, to tell their story, um, is one thing that I'm looking forward to for season 3 and beyond. And also the other thing I'm looking forward to is just the ongoing maintenance and relationship maintenance of every connection we've made with these creatives. I would love to hear kind of maybe a check-in or a part 2 of creatives we interviewed in the beginning of the episode. It's been about a year and a half. See what other projects they have going on, what projects are brewing, and sustaining and maintaining that relationship, and almost creating this like creator community hub of ongoing of pouring energy into the relationships that we have made. So I do think for me, those are some things I'm looking forward to for season 3, with a lot more things in store, but we won't spill too much. But what about you, friend? Anything? What are you looking forward to for season 3 and beyond?
Yeah, friend. I am really excited about season 3 because it's going to be an opportunity to continue to bring more of our own personal journeys into the podcast as creatives. Um, to your point, it is so exciting to take the creative community that we built to the next level. And like you mentioned, having more opportunities to engage the creators that we've learned from and heard their stories. But I also want to think about ways to bring more of our like journey, and we've started doing that a bit in season
Mm-hmm.
3. So I'm excited to, continue to evolve that. And like you mentioned, be the storyteller of our own personal journey as well, and be able to
Mm-hmm.
narrate that and speak that is so much, there's so much power in that because, you know, I love that we have these like beautiful, unique identities, and, being able to share that on the podcast is so,
Mm-hmm.
so important. And so I'm excited about that. I mentioned at the beginning of pod the podcast that this was a that I realized that, coming home is a lifelong project. So I kind of want to share that with you all in the podcast as well. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
am I continuing to evolve? How does that relate to my creativity? And how does that relate to this platform? Because I feel like it's an honor to still be a work in life in progress. It's an honor to still have stuff that I am internally working on and that I am
Mm-hmm.
excited to continue to know about myself. So I want to share that with you all, and as well in doing so, like being able to pull that out of our creatives and hear about them as well. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
creating these beautiful works of art, but I want to hear about them as well, and like what are they working on as their own personal like life project as well.
Yeah.
And that to me sounds like that's just what's most exciting about season 3. But the last thing, I think we're really coming into ourselves, friend, with the podcast as creatives. So I feel excited to see that confidence in the podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
see that evolve
Mm-hmm.
in season 3 as well. And of course, continue to stay like as authentic as I can in this podcast. Like if like
Mm-hmm.
tears come up like they did today, let them flow. If excitement is
Mm-hmm.
popping out of me, like let that show. And yeah, I'm really excited about that, friend.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I think there's a lot that we've been working on in the behind the scenes, and I'm super excited to just hit the ground running and get back to the creative project that we're working on with the podcast, but also, again, to your point, that our own creative project as individual, which is our life project, or
Yes.
yeah, our personal development and just the evolution of who we are as creatives, but also as co-hosts and partners. So super excited again to restart this journey again in season 3 with everything that we've learned, reflected on, and with refreshed new energy for sure.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely, friend. Absolutely. And just to wrap up our last segment, we love to do this bonfire. It's hot in the West Coast. It's really hard for me to picture a bonfire today. But, there's, we're talking about this fresh new energy that we're feeling energized from. So
Hmm.
if we could picture this fire, it's big, we're sitting around it, friend, and maybe we just wrote like a little couple journal notes that we want to throw in the fire
Hmm.
to release. Like, what is that, friend? What are you throwing into the fire today?
Yeah, I think for me, what I'm releasing and putting out there in the universe is that intentionality behind repurposing or reallocating, whether it's energy, time, to things that really fulfill the soul, the body, this, and whatever grounds me personally and everyone out there. I think is that's what I'm really seeing and putting out there. Is just it is possible to repurpose, reallocate things that really nourishes the body, the mind, the soul. What about you, friend? What are you releasing, putting out there in this cozy bonfire that we have?
Yes, what I am releasing today is expectations. So I feel like growing up, I had a hard time with mistakes. I'm like, oh no, I made a mistake, and I would get all in my head about it and just feel really terrible about it. And it was like the self expectations I set up on myself. And so I want to release after season 3. I want to release expectations
Mm.
about how I think relationships should be or where they should be at,
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
where expectations about where I should be at in terms of my own healing and even grief.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and yeah, expectations about the podcast as well. Like I genuinely believe that as long as we're being present and we are, pouring into Creator Corner, I think it would evolve into exactly what it needs to be for our audience. It's for ourselves. So yeah, I want to release expectations. I want to enjoy this ride of creating this platform with you and be present. And a lot of that for
Mm-hmm.
me
Mm-hmm.
is having no assumptions about what that would look like. So yeah, that's what I'm most excited and what I'm releasing into the fire today.
I love that, friend. And as we wrap up, definitely would love to hear, yeah, from our audience in terms of, well, we talked about a lot of travel or what travel does for us personally, but also in terms of that creative pursuit. So we'd love to hear from the audience in terms of how does travel inspire, enhance, or change, your way of thinking, whether it's for creative pursuits or whether it could be personal thinking. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you all. Thanks for tuning in. Creative Hora is a podcast production hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This episode is edited by Abdullah Kawish and is produced by akstudio.global.